Hello and welcome to the Buttcast. Today's special guests are
Serge
and
Ryan.
yes, we got some more not strictly Yu-Gi-Oh players here today. Serge, you played a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh, but right now, what do you play mostly?
mainly just Vanguard.
So we've got a Vanguard player, and then Ryan, it looks like you're getting a little bit back more into Yu-Gi-Oh.
I only play one deck, and that's set 5 pass.
Fair. But you were playing Digimon?
Yeah, I play Digimon rather competitively.
Oh. Competitive Digimon player. What's the competitive scene like for Digimon?
We usually get cash prizes.
Oh.
So,
Changes every freaking set.
yeah, I just like it, but some of the older set stuff is still good.
Yeah.
You do need to pay attention to the meta, because
yeah.
now there's a bunch of cards out.
So what's like the price range for competitive strategies?
Digimon's cheap to get into. It's just they have a bunch of alt arts, so if you want to max rare to your deck, that's when it starts getting pricey.
Not only that, because like you said, you have to pay attention to the meta, so that means you have to constantly be updating your deck.
So it's probably like mid-range Yu-Gi-Oh! At worst.
Well, Yu-Gi-Oh right now, it's like, I don't know what current Ishizu tier is, but it's very expensive.
Ishizu tier's expensive, but mainly because of the tier stuff. But also because the B-Steals are the new staples of the new hot staples, so everyone's trying to buy those.
Yeah.
Other than that, pretty dang affordable, even for the other meta staples.
Yeah, surprising. Yu-Gi-Oh! The current tier 0 deck is actually surprising. For a tier 0 deck, it's pretty cheap.
Yeah.
Oddly, Sprite is arguably the expensive one because of blue. But then again, I guess the field spell for tiers is very expensive. Anyway.
The most expensive card right now on Digimon meta deck is Examon. He's $43 a copy, but he's the only card you need to buy that's expensive compared to like the staples you need for Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yeah. So that's definitely cheaper. I'd say that's a lot cheaper.
You do have to play at 4 of, so that might get pricey.
Oh, 4 ofs?
Yeah, this game is a 4 of.
Pretty much every game is, except for Yu-Gi-Oh!
Oh, yeah. Magic is, Digimon is.
Pokemon.
Vanguard, too?
Vanguard and Pokemon are both 4 ofs as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's to our detriment.
Sometimes, yeah, but Yu-Gi-Oh! is unique in the fact that it's the only 3 of game that's right now unpopular.
That's interesting. I wonder why that is.
Kazuki Takahashi made up the rules, and he didn't make them up very well.
What? What are you talking about?
Come on, you saw Duelist Kingdom. They were making up stuff on the fly.
Well, it's not. He made up whoever. I don't know if he specifically made up the card. The card game, as it appeared, completely different. If you look at how it started, there were lanes. Have you seen this?
Yeah, I've seen them.
Yeah, in the manga, they had lanes.
Yeah, I remember when
they had a board.
I remember the game that Bandai made before Konami got the rights. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but no, it didn't become the way it was until like Battle City, when he created some actual formal rules to it.
Yeah. And even then, they were all rubbish.
Yeah, but the game kept changing after a while.
Mm-hmm.
But I see one more Ash Blossom, I'm literally going to fucking murder somebody.
It's not even being played very much right now. Because it's not very good.
It's just the stigma.
The stigma?
Hand traps are very unpopular sometimes.
When
I used to play.
At this point, it's just a meta call. No one's using really Ash because Ash doesn't do much. But
always playing hand traps.
Yeah, but give it 3 or 5. Give it 3 or 5 different formats, and
it could be the next format.
Yeah, it could be the next format. You never know.
So how's the tournament scene at Yu-Gi-Oh? Because I don't really go to competitive tournaments for Yu-Gi-Oh.
Same.
I mean, from what I've seen from the YCS championships, it's a freaking nightmare to just look at all the chain links. Because don't you do like 2 different chain link 10 sets before you finish up your Ishizu tier combo?
Well, because of how Ishizu tier works, there's a lot of because it's a mill strategy.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of graveyard triggers. So it could be that you do something that mills 3, like you activate Sheeran or something, which lets you mill 3 cards, and then that hits 2 of the Ishizu cards that let you mill 5, but that makes both players mill 5. So now both players have milled 10 cards, and if they're both Ishizu tier, then the other guy probably hit some Ishizu cards that are going to make both players mill more. And they both probably hit tier names that are going to do something. So it's like it could go as high as 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 triggers. Just trigger effects can activate, bam, all at once if that happens. And then also, you're going to try to stop the other person, so you're going to be chaining cards in the hand, like the new, like Didi Crows and like the Bestial cards. And also, there are cards in the grave now that can chain to it, like the new Ishizu, the other half of the Ishizu cards that banish themselves to shuffle guys. So, yeah, that can get pretty... You can have chain links that are like probably up to like 20 cards long in that very rare situation. It'll probably get up to like 10 pretty commonly in the mirror. But also, it's like that's like the whole point of the strategy, is that when you mill cards, you hit a bunch of cards that do things. If you're not playing the mirror, it's not nearly as bad. But then again, the metagame is playing the mirror.
I just find it hilarious that the game has gotten to a point to where you're doing so many effects that you're just resolving effects before you play anything else.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty fast. There's a lot going on. But that's still a little weird when it's that many at once. Because one of the interesting, like, weakness, quote-unquote, weaknesses of tier is that you only get 3 fusion summons. That's it. There are only 3 tier names that let you fusion summon. And, like, the inboard is, like, the fusion monsters you can make with that. So, you actually, if the tier player is any good, you get through it pretty quick. And in that situation where it goes up to, like, Chain Link 8 or something, the turn is, like, over almost immediately after that ends. It's not like they are taking really that much more actions per turn. It's just every now and again it gets compressed to one massive chain link, which in a way is kind of cool. In another, you can look at it either way. You can look at it like, whoa, that's crazy. We hit chain link 20 in this match. Or you can look at it like, wow, Yu-Gi-Oh's gone off the rails. They managed to hit 20 whole chain links. Back in my day, if you hit 4 and accumulated fortune, that was insane. Different ways of looking at it, for sure. Yeah. I do kind of miss the chain link cards, though. What's that?
Chain Destruction's probably the one I remember the most.
Chain Strike, accumulated fortune.
I'm just saying, give Volcanic support, Konami.
I agree.
We should bring back burn decks.
I think that having like one okay burn deck would probably be a good thing.
Just as long as it's not a burn deck that also locks your opponent out of whatever they're doing.
I know, because like Ishizu tier, they only have one negate. Like spell trap negate. That's it. Crime. So if you're playing, like in theory, something like burn should be pretty good right now. And it would make sense to have card strategies like burn that thrive in really shallow metagames. Because burn's problem is that if they bump up against a 5 negate combo deck, they just auto lose. Literally nothing they can do about that. But if they're teched out for a tier 0 format like this, in theory, that'd be really good for them. But it's just not at the same power level. They just don't have the kinds of cards they need. They haven't gotten any support. I mean, I guess technically Chain Strike came off the ban list. Which, cool.
Just play a Runic deck then.
That's the problem, yeah. It's just better to play Runics.
Okay. Is Runic meta?
No,
but it was immediately before this format.
Plus, it also has a unique interaction where you're just banishing cards from the top of your opponent's deck, so going first, it's not a bad way to go against tier.
There's a couple good things about, again, last format, because it was being played a lot with sprites, and a couple other variants, but it was mostly the sprite tier Runic deck was the thing that was being played, and if not the best deck, was up there, which to me, that's what other people think 20 Changeling, they find that scary. You know, what scares me is when the best deck is the 3 best decks all put together that terrifies me because it kind of makes it feel like it's truly homogenizing, which I think is a really bad thing. But anyway, they're good cards. You don't actually mill your opponent out ever. They're just not good enough at doing that.
Yeah.
But they are just good cards. I mean, drawing like 3 every turn is pretty good. Turns out, has a weird sort of Sky Striker-y feel in that way. Except somehow, to me, even worse, even more degenerate. Cause I don't know why exactly, but for some reason, the runic cards, they really bother me. They really hit me in all the wrong ways.
You know, well, speaking of Striker, they just got more extenders.
They got a lot of new cards that don't make a lot of sense to me.
They don't make sense because you haven't read their manga.
So it's a lore thing.
It's a lore thing, yeah. So the lore for the Sky Strikers is that Rei is one of the last humans left on the planet. Everything else is robots. So because of that, the new cards, they're machines because they're robots and they were her caretakers.
Okay. So, wait, sorry, what were you going to say, first of all?
I'm just very disappointed that they don't, like, make story content for, like, the other storylines they've done. Because I don't want to have to, like, read a Konami magazine just to know the war for, Dogmatica, or before that with the dual terminal stuff, because I would have to look at, if I want the whole war, I would have to look at each individual card, and I think with dual terminal alone, it was like 300 cards.
300 different cards, and after dual terminal, before Dogmatica was the whole thing with Avermax and Crusadia, Orchist, Brawlers.
Dual terminal Dogmatic.
Well, that's not dual terminal.
No, dual terminal was the...
Dual terminal is the Ice Barriers,
Shaddolls.
the Evil Swarms, Shaddolls, all that.
Orchis storyline, I don't really...
Yeah, Orchis storyline is part of the...
Branded...
World Legacy.
World Legacy lore is what people usually call it.
Branded.
And then Branded's part of the Dogmatica and all that.
Yeah.
Dogmatica's a bit more manageable because it's only like 4 or 5 archetypes, I believe, off the top of my head.
6 right now, actually, because you're forgetting Beastils is part of it, Ice Jade.
It's still ongoing.
It's still ongoing. And they keep adding archetypes. Spriggans are part of it.
It's interesting that it's still ongoing, but then they started a new one. I'm pretty sure the Vista Starfrost is a different thing.
It's a different thing, and I think they have a rivals right now in Kasatri Law.
Because they're fire and one's water.
Well, kinda.
And then I know Tears are part of that storyline with the Casatrias.
Yeah, because Scareclaw counts as support for them.
Well, a lot of this one's pretty easy because they all say and Vista Starfrost.
Yeah,
all the cards. They all say, oh, this archetype, and also Vista Starfrost, which makes it obvious that they're all part of the same universe or whatever.
Yeah, I
agree that they definitely need to make more content. I think the magazine stuff is less than good enough. It's very cool. I definitely think they should keep doing that.
It's not in the States or any other country besides Japan.
Which is what I appreciate mostly about Vanguard and how they handle their lore.
Yeah, you just go on Twitter.
Oh yeah, you can go. Yeah, you can literally go on Twitter. Like their official Twitter, they like to talk about it.
But their official Twitter will tell you the lore. While Yu-Gi-Oh, it's just. Yeah. I don't even know what the Yu-Gi-Oh is.
They don't even have like a website where they just publish it in English. Like Vanguard has that too. Like they release character stories and just side stuff, and you learn more about the details of the world.
I appreciate what Vanguard and Digimon does with alt arts because you kind of don't see that with Yu-Gi-Oh.
Oh, yeah, there's not enough. I think Yu-Gi-Oh definitely needs more alt arts
or full art cards because
I definitely think they need to break away from the really strict
small border.
Yeah,
that they've been working with.
Like what they did with was it
Rush Duel?
Rush Duels. Like how they handle their artwork in Rush Duels is actually I think a lot better.
It's better for sure.
I've seen proxies where they just like extend the image to make it full art, and it looks so much better.
It does look good.
I mean, there's a lot of great.
They could just do it for like secret rares or reprints of certain cards.
Or they can just make it a unique rarity that's just full art.
I mean, give people more reason to get it because honestly, most of the time you get a unique rarity, it's just a different finish to the standard art. Mm-hmm. Doesn't really make much sense. While in Yu-Gi-Oh and like in Vanguard and Digimon, you're getting like this really cool different card design on there. You could get like a really foiled out finish, or you could get like the extended artwork, or even a legacy artwork if it's in the classic card.
Does Yu-Gi-Oh credit the authors on the cards?
No, they do
The
not.
artists?
All of those artworks are always a collaboration.
I don't know. I kind of like it when Vanguard or
Digimon.
Digimon in the corner they tell you who the illustrator is. It's usually in Japanese, but
Sometimes in English.
if you can look up the katakana, you can find the artist.
Yeah, because like a lot of their artwork is awesome, and
Because are Yu-Gi-Oh artists on an NDA where they can't say, "Oh, I worked on"?
Pretty sure.
pretty sure, and since it's a collaboration, they can't really get sole credit for it.
Because I follow a couple artists who draw for the Vanguard stuff, and they draw so much for their characters they make.
Especially the guy that made Minerva, which to this day is one of the only Vanguard cards to actually get like a figure officially made by the company. So much so that they shelled out so much money for this card to be reintroduced into the game in its current format. I mean, it's unbelievable how much they're treating this one with favor. Like, they made a special rarity where you could get a numbered copy of an alternate art for the card.
Well, if you make a figure of it, you got to make sure it stays relevant.
It was, and
It was, and it's metas too.
like it was when it first came out.
I mean, it was meta when its G unit came out too.
Yeah, I mean, it got great support, and maybe the retrain is going to be good too. I mean, so far, the cards they've been revealing out of that set has been pretty good too.
Yu-Gi-Oh has been a bit more prolific with the alt arts recently. They've been a bit more prolific with the alt arts. They started doing alt art for the Ghost Girls for a while. They got alt arts for randomly, Alistair the Invoker has an alt art. They made alt arts for some more waifu cards, like the Live
IP.
Live
Twins. IP got an alt art. So they're IP and also Unicorn got an alt art too.
Yeah.
So they've been doing a better job of giving us more alt arts as time goes on.
I would like if they credit the artist and then like let us know who they are. So I'm pretty sure because most artists have like something on Twitter that we can look at.
Yeah, but there's still a lot of good stuff they've been doing lately. Like, they have been making things easier to get into the game, even if the meta right now is definitely not casual friendly.
Yeah, I've talked a lot about how I want the pipeline to be better, and I can tie this back to our previous thing about having the stories available. My personal opinion, obviously having it posted somewhere like on a website for anyone to read, that's just obvious. You should do that.
Or make manga or commercials.
Or
Because sometimes the Yu-Gi-Oh commercials are just buy this new set.
I have not seen one of their commercials in so long.
The last one I saw was like in 2020, I think.
I see banner ads, maybe.
I think it was just the English voice actor for Yu-Gi just saying buy the new Legendary Collection or something.
Yeah.
I think it's, honestly, that sort of advertising, I don't think they need to do anyway. Just like, buy this thing. I think it makes way more sense to do what I'm about to describe, which we already know that Konami has made an anime with Netflix. Castlevania. Castlevania did awesome. And a lot of people then went to play old Castlevania games because of the show, because it was so good. A bunch of people who have never even heard of what Castlevania is started playing Castlevania games.
Hasn't been a Castlevania game in like a decade.
Exactly.
No, there is not.
There was zero hype about it at all. And they released the show, and now all these people are like, man, I'd love it if they released a new Castlevania game.
So yeah, if they release a good Yu-Gi-Oh show about the war and not just people playing the card game.
Exactly.
The Sevens isn't that good.
It's mainly for the new like game they're pitching in Japan, that because like modern Yu-Gi-Oh, even if they try to do it in an anime format, even in simplified would be like way too complex for most people.
That's why I think they need to move. Well, also just in general, personally, I've never particularly liked all problems are resolved by playing a card game in this weird, wacky world that we have created. I've never been a fan of that. I think it'd be way better if it was just the world of the cards in the story, that story just being told. People already, like, if you go dual terminal lore, look it up and find some crappy animation someone made on YouTube.
That's way more interesting.
It's got so many views. They are wildly popular, and I don't mean crappy in the sense like they didn't do a good job. They did a great job, but it's nothing compared to
AAA,
like
what they could be.
Oh, yeah,
a full team,
no studio budget behind it, just one guy or
passion project.
Yeah.
Compared to an actual production,
compared to an actual anime they could make of the same thing. If they just made an anime of dual terminal and then sync that up with some dual terminal support being
Like,
released.
you could do World Legacy. It has a cut and dry linear storyline that you can follow.
Yeah, I mean, I also think it's why like Master Duel was so popular when it came out, because in the story mode, you didn't get a whole lot, but you at least got like a little tagline and stories of like what each archetype was about.
I play Monarchs, and I learned more about Monarchs from Master Duel than anything else.
Yeah.
About who they are. Because I know the art's supposed to show you a story, but you can't really tell a lot.
Yeah, it's not enough to really piece together, especially for us dummies. Who are
Us
out here playing
dummies
Yu-Gi-Oh!
who play a
Expect us to
different
put it together.
language.
Yeah. Yeah.
As you can tell, Yu-Gi-Oh! Players cannot read.
No, they
That's true.
cannot.
So it's already hard enough to read the cards. You expect us to piece together the storyline you got going on?
From, like, esoteric pictures.
And traps and spells, which might not even be related to the archetype.
And then it's like with anime, you can give like these little niche personality traits to make characters more likable.
Yeah, and then it's just advertising. And it's like, in my opinion...
Because if I told you... Oh, sorry. If I told you Ecclesia eats a lot, would you know that from her...
Nope.
No, you have to learn that from the lore you look up.
Mm-hmm. And then suddenly that gives the character more personality, and now people become more attached. And now they're going to spend money on the newest version of Ecclesia, because she's got like 10.
She's got 2. Well, I guess Cartesia.
I'd say
That's not her. She got corrupted.
That would...
Why does every Yu-Gi-Oh! Storyline corrupt for like the past 3? Corrupt the main heroine.
It's a good trope. I mean, it's the reason why like Vanguard cards, like when you look at Vanguard players, like so many of them are attached to cards, not even the same way Yu-Gi-Oh! Players are, because...
I mean, yeah, gay Youthberg.
Like, to explain, there's these, so, and there is our anime, which is your standard, people playing card games, doing things, resolving. Typically, it's a little more realistic, because they actually do tournaments and stuff, instead of just saving the world. Yeah, they don't really deal with that in modern seasons, but behind the fact that they can get attached to the characters to play the decks, there is still consistent lore for all of these cards and their artworks and their boss units, and people can identify with that. It's the main reason why, for the first time in a long time, a deck in Vanguard has passed $150 for base rarity cards, just because it's so popular with most of the fan base.
And also, I don't know what Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime does, but like, do you guys have fight scenes, or is it just monster attack and then other monster dies?
Yeah, monster attack, other monster dies.
Well, in Vanguard...
There's some exceptions, but...
With Vanguard, the current season, they show straight up fight scenes. So it's not just like, oh, they're just being summoned or something. You're in the fight. You watch it happen.
Yeah, like you can see like them actually putting effort into an attack between 2 boss monsters in the show, like what the characters would imagine the fight would go through.
Also banger music.
Oh yeah, the music's always been a banger, but Bushy owns like 5 different idol groups at a single point, so it's like they have the sources.
They've got the sauce. They already got everything they need to make good music. So.
They own a music production company. They own the Japanese Wrestling League.
Oh, yeah.
So they have sometimes the wrestlers show up as voice actors.
That's cool.
Yeah.
They own an acting agency, so they just get their actors from themselves.
And if not,
instead of having to hire.
And if not, they can shell out the money for like good voice actors. Like one character that was really popular back in the day, was Dio's voice actor from JoJo.
Oh.
Also, Artorias from GX. So, like, if you want to hear the world memes, just watch Artorias in the Japanese dub play Arcana.
Because he says the same line, basically.
The world, yeah.
That's funny.
But what else is it? Like, literally this last season alone, they had, like, A-list voice actors on their thing. They only got 1 line or 2.
1 or 2 lines.
Like, they just shelled out money to say, oh, they're going to be in the new season.
Yeah, it was just funny, like how some of them were hype and most of them did nothing.
They don't even get their own scenes, which I can say is a disappointing part because they cut the episode short.
Yeah, they focus a lot more on character interactions than they do on the actual card game fights, because it plays out more like actually just watching 2 people play the game rather than seeing a hyper stylized version of playing the game.
Because it's like a drama more than like what Yu-Gi-Oh! Does, where they talk while they're dueling.
Yeah, and Yu-Gi-Oh! It's always, like, you'll have full episodes that's just in the middle of a duel, and it'll end, and the duel isn't even over. The next episode will just resume that duel.
Well, Vanguard is just, the fight is 1 episode, you get something cool to watch,
funny.
At the end of the drum, it is Vanguard fight.
It's still funny.
I mean,
It's still a fight.
I mean, a Vanguard's always a best of one, so you don't really have to do too much. I mean, games are typically 20 to 30 minutes, 30 minutes if it actually drags out.
Well, it's funny because obviously Yu-Gi-Oh! Is best of 3. The show is never best of 3.
Yeah.
It's always best
It
of
is
one.
always best of 1.
Also,
Which is how it's played in Japan.
Isn't the game 8,000 life points, but the anime makes it 4,000 because
8,000 would
it
take
would
too
take
long.
too long.
The anime has so many differences.
Also, when are Link spells going to come?
Link spells?
Yeah,
You don't remember
lightning
Link arrows?
Like Judgment arrows.
Link arrows.
Link arrows.
Yeah.
What?
It's a spell card that has link
It was
arrows
in
pointing
Vrains.
up.
You don't believe me?
Those was back during Master.
They make up a lot of things that they never actually make.
I know, it's so dumb.
Well, I feel like Link spells would be cool.
Well, at least back when Master Rule 4 was a thing.
Yeah, it was like only one card, Judgment arrows.
Yeah, instead it had 3 arrows pointing up, left, and right.
But what's the point of But then it'll never use the other arrows.
You don't
Because
know.
they can't point to anything.
No, you put it in the center spell and trap card zone.
Yeah, so it points up to the top 3.
Yeah, to the
But
top.
a Link monster, all of its arrows can point to something.
I just thought it'd be a neat way to do spells.
What do you need? What do you need to do to spells? What is wrong with spell cards?
No, I just thought it'd be something cool. That's
I
it.
mean, sure.
Something-
It would be interesting.
It'll add another layer of gameplay.
I don't think it needs to actually. I think it can just. We already have cards that do similar things, and they just verbally describe what they do. They don't need to be a unique type of card with arrows.
Oh, there's one other thing about Yu-Gi-Oh! I wish they'd had. You know how Magic and Digimon also has keywords?
Yeah.
I think Yu-Gi-Oh! They could cut down their text a lot if they started using keywords.
They kind of do in problem-solving card text.
Yeah, but like,
Kinda.
But like I'm saying, for the average player to come in, it's easier to explain how like Rush or Blitz works in Digimon than certain other cards.
or like, yeah, so you use this effect, you send that to the graveyard, then that effect triggers, then you send a card from your hand to the graveyard, then that triggers, and then you summon 3 monsters.
While like if I
What were you
Digivolve,
describing?
Just an example of like
Was
how
that
stupid
a
effects.
Yu-Gi-Oh explanation?
Yu-Gi-Oh explanation.
Because that could have been any card game.
Well,
The words you just said.
no,
Well,
but that's literally how you would have to describe how that each effects work. While in other
Yeah.
games,
This card has a trigger effect. That's a keyword.
like for example,
but does it explain to new players what trigger even means?
I mean, it's fairly self-explanatory.
Fairly, but like you got to remember that most people have to remember that instead of like in other games, keywords just explain like,
You
that's
still
what it
have
does.
to tell them what a keyword does. If you give people Yu-Gi-Oh cards, if you give like kids Yu-Gi-Oh cards and other card game without explanation, they're more likely to figure out the Yu-Gi-Oh cards because there's no keywords. Now, long term, it might be better to have keywords because it's more self-explanatory. But you get a problem with I don't remember I know there's a fancy term for it, but when you end up making too many keywords, you have to have less than a certain amount of keywords, otherwise there's just too many of them. And sometimes you get to the point where they just keep making new ones. Yu-Gi-Oh kind of tried keywords for a little bit. The unions, spirits, and Geminis. Basically, they tried to be keywords, but they realized that sucked, and they would rather just, on a case-by-case basis, decide what the card does, which is really the advantage of not using keywords, is that you never have to lock yourself into something. And then, if there's something that happens to be super common, people just make a keyword for it. It's like, oh, it's a Stratos for their archetype.
Yeah, but that would involve you getting really in-depth into the game, which, I mean, most people are going to be doing anyways if they really wanted to get into a card game.
I mean, that's a problem with Yu-Gi-Oh! In general, is the really high barrier to entry.
Yeah.
But Magic Duels help with that a lot,
Although,
especially the solo mode.
oh, yeah, no, it does. But I feel like it's also created a lot of players that don't know how to do interactions very well. Because it's been automated for them, so they really don't know how to critically think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which is, I feel like is a big concept of what it takes to be a good player, that you have to be able to do those interactions on your own without anything else.
Yeah, that's the simulator problem for sure. But if we're getting to the point that's the choke point, I think that's a good choke point, to be honest. Because right now there's a couple of choke points. And one of them is people knowing Yu-Gi-Oh! Still exists is a pretty big one. We could probably resolve that pretty good by having the side of shows and stuff we were talking about. That sort of thing could definitely help. Bless you. We could also, but then now that they know about the game, they need somewhere to start. Master Duel is a great place for them, but I'd still say it's inadequate. Personally, I think the solo mode should be like, I know they're slowly expanding it, but like the tutorial section of it, the genuinely tutorial section, definitely needs to be even longer. It's skippable, so people who actually know what they're doing, you can just skip it. But it's like, for new players, you can play all the way through it and still not have any idea how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Right?
No, I mean, they only teach you basic mechanics and not even, like, how to interact with your opponent.
Yep. So I think that they should really, really buff that out so that you can take the person from literally 0 to being able to play Tri-Brigade full power without hiccup. And I think using solo mode, that is completely possible. They can totally do that. I don't know why they don't seem to have an interest in doing that.
They already got the audience they wanted to get, which is a lot of the people who were stuck at home playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And wanted a simulator.
A lot of it is people who are aware and like Yu-Gi-Oh! But don't have a community. That's one of the biggest draws of Master Duel, is you don't need a local card shop.
Some people just don't have access.
Yeah.
No, yeah, like some areas are just dead, like, just don't have, like, I know in, by where Eddie lives in, what is it, Wakahachi? There's, like, no community over there for any card.
Arlington was dead for, like, the mid-2000s for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And early 10s.
Until, like, shops like,
Limitless showed up.
Limitless showed up, yeah, and it started...
Because people would have to go to, like, places like in Dallas.
In Fort
Worth to play, like, actual competitive. Not just you and your friends.
If you want to play actual competitive, yeah, you definitely gotta
get a local.
Go to isn't it Epic here around? That's the place.
Yeah, that's the place.
In Fort Worth.
Yeah, Epic Games.
Epic is.
Epic is all the way in North Fort Worth by like Hearst.
I'm pretty sure that's the competitive place in our area.
Actually, Evo would be a good contender too.
LGS is also enjoyable.
That's all the way in Dallas. But no, like, Evo's good. Like, there's plenty of places for people to play Yu-Gi-Oh! And DFW right now, and that's good.
Where I live, we have a local. During COVID, though, like, after it was like, if you have enough people, you can play again. I went up there. It had died. Without the people continuing, it had died. Which is really, I wonder, I don't know how common of an experience this is, but that card shop kind of started, to the best of my understanding, started as like a Yu-Gi-Oh! Card shop. Like, the owner played Yu-Gi-Oh! And that was his main thing. And as time went on, he got into other card games. And then eventually he kind of got into D&D and stuff. And then that's kind of where it's transitioned. Now it's a lot more about Warhammer and D&D and that sort of stuff.
Funny thing you mentioned Warhammer, because I play it.
Yes, you do.
I'm saying the right one. Warhammer is the one with little figures, right?
Yeah.
Well,
there's a lot. There's also BattleTech.
Yeah, there's Warhammer, and then there's Warhammer 40K if you want to play a more sci-fi themed one.
Once I went to my card shop, and my history teacher was there.
Oh my
and I was like, like, your kid play card games or something? And he's like, no, I play Warhammer. And I was like, oh, okay.
It's an old game, though. It came out when, in the 90s?
It's 30 years old.
It's just funny to
90s.
see your teacher in a place they don't belong to your, high school brain. Like,
usually you see young kids.
Yeah.
My teachers, well, it wasn't even, my Yu-Gi-Oh! Group there, 30-year-olds. Me, one other teen, and then a child. That was...
So the child was the best player amongst you, right?
No. He was terrible. He played Dark Magician.
Ooh.
Before he got
support?
Before he got Magician Soul?
He couldn't afford Magician Souls. I was actually playing I was playing there when Magician Souls came out, and I watched him not be able to afford it.
Sad.
And the guy who's like my age played Teller.
Teller Knight.
Uh-huh.
That was a fun deck when it came out.
And then all the other people, it was weird. During like Spiral format, all those 30-year-old dudes who were there got real competitive. Not all of them, but a lot more of them were playing Tier 0 Spiral format. They were pretty into it. But then after that, they kind of fell off. That sounds kind of rude. They kind of lost interest.
They became kind of mid, bro.
They kind of lost interest. They started playing more roguish strategies. Like Trickstar became really common to see at my local, even though it wasn't really that good anymore. But they kind of all, for some reason, they all just kind of lost interest. which was interesting. So I guess it wasn't too surprising that after when COVID hit, they all just kind of stopped showing up.
Yeah.
Maybe they do now. I haven't been in quite a while.
Yeah, COVID really killed anybody's drive to go outside for like a solid year
and a half.
Well,
this was already
after it was
post-COVID.
over.
Yeah, this was like after Konami officially said that they were doing tournaments again.
Because even though they said it was over, a lot of people kind of was still in the same mindset.
Understandably, a lot of people were really freaked out. Which
really changed
I
a lot of
worked in
people's habits.
Oh yeah,
in a clinic, so I saw the worst of it.
I worked at Kroger when it first started. So I got the nothing to do with the actual disease, but the panic of people. I got to see firsthand.
So people buying toilet paper?
Yeah.
And
people throwing a bunch of stuff in the cart, realizing they didn't have enough money to buy the stuff, leaving the cart somewhere, someone else saying, can I buy this? And then some employee saying, yeah, and then they just took the cart and bought everything in it. They didn't pick out any of the stuff in that cart. They just saw a cart full of stuff and they're like, I'll buy it.
Now, what I did was I was, during that first year in 2020, I was a Target employee.
Mm.
And what I did was front end. So I was either on cashiers, helping people out. And this was during Christmas, mind you. So I was all throughout December, I was either on the registers or I was working online order pickups. So I had to go throughout the whole store pretty much nonstop, getting people's orders, getting them ready, set up, if I could find everything.
Yeah.
And it was just, sometimes it got crazy because people would be ordering all sorts of stuff. And during Christmas, I mean, obviously a ton of gifts and stuff, but you know.
I shopped at Vietnamese markets, and usually the prices there are fair. Also, I tend to know the people at the cash register, so I get away with some extra stuff.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Yeah, so not to flex,
Not to flex, as he visibly, for our audio listeners, that being everyone, he is actually flexing right now with his huge masculine muscles.
Just giving just showing off to everyone.
Giving a total gun show over here.
But no, COVID was really tough for people, and even now it's tough for people to get jobs and stuff.
Yeah,
because some employers are in that mind space that we have to work even harder now.
Yeah,
a lot of them are like gonna go bankrupt if they don't. Like COVID really hurt their bottom line, and they got to get back off the ground.
I'm not talking about like small business. I'm talking like
big
larger
business.
Yeah, like big, business. like Targets and stuff
they're still exploiting their workers even worse now.
Yeah, like I know, like working at a Target again now. Obviously not for Target, but for a company partner with them. Mm-hmm. Like I'm in the tech department, and normally you expect like maybe one person on registers and someone throughout the floor just stocking things up, getting things in order. Mm-hmm. It's not like they are nonstop stocking. Like they don't have really much chance to actually be at the registers, so it's mostly empty. And then most people wouldn't be able to get anything there if it wasn't for me, who, since I work for the mobile department there, I'm supposed to stay there for phones, but I can also do checkouts at the register. So I basically, if I don't have a phone deal going on right now, I can just check people out, and that's what I've been doing for the most part.
Sorry. The phrase I hate the most is nobody wants to work, because nobody wants to work for like pennies anymore.
No, COVID really changed the way how much people want to value their time.
Oh yeah, that definitely.
Also,
employers lost quite a bit of power, but it seems like they're getting it back now.
Of course.
Yeah.
Like I work at Amazon, and a lot of people say bad things about Amazon, but I'd like to clear something up. 100% depends on your facility you work at. I think this is the case for a lot of things. Like you're mentioning Target. My girlfriend works at Target. She lives at a Target.
Oh yeah, no, like I did my training at another Target before I went to the one I work at now. Mm-hmm. It was actually a lot better over there. I appreciate the work. Like people were a lot happier. I actually had way more power than I did over at this one, because I was actually allowed to go into the back and help them out with stuff they needed to grab.
Yeah.
Because that also let me just be more useful and not just sit around doing nothing if I can't sell phones.
It depends on your manager too, because if your manager's just a shitty guy.
Yeah. It's
how
it's going to be.
Yeah, like day of Black Friday, I'm supposed to have my equipment ready because I need it to do work.
Uh-huh.
And the manager of that Target said, "Oh no, we can't let you have one because I need all hands on deck to use those for pickup orders." Even though in the contract that my company has with Target, I need to have one at all times.
Is this the current place you work at or before?
This is where I work at right now. I barely started, so I wasn't sure what to do. So I just said okay, and then I text my boss saying, hey, this is what happened. And he says, no, you got to get one. It's like we're required to have one.
Yeah.
And I got one, so then you know that even if they're the boss, they're not the smartest person in the place.
Not necessarily.
I appreciate when you're allowed to question authority.
Yeah.
Not like be a dick about it, but like
no, but
genuinely,
I understand that you're gonna need as much of these on hand as possible, but like I'm here to do my job, and I kind of need this equipment since you guys took away all the other facilities we used to use them. You made us dependent on them, so I kind of have to have one.
Yeah, I agree. We should be allowed to question authority, which is why we should be allowed to ask Konami why you do this, why you do this, that, and the other thing. It seems like
Konami's customer service, or like they don't really have a complaints department,
okay,
or someone where you can suggest to. The Digimon card game, the big tournament that happened nearby here recently, the creators showed up for that, and they talked to everybody.
Isn't Digimon what country of origin is Digimon?
Japan.
I thought so.
The Japanese creators came here for the tournament.
Some Japanese dude just showed up and I was like,
yeah, he spoke pretty good English.
Oh, he did? Okay, never mind then.
But I meant like, it's pretty good to be able to talk to somebody. They also had a Q&A panel.
Well, I know there's a joke about Magic the Gathering where they give out so much information. You know what the lead designer had for breakfast that day? Like, you know everything about these people. Whereas in Yu-Gi-Oh, it's all very smoke and mirrors. You don't really have any information.
You don't even know what's being reprinted until like the week before. And that's just because someone leaked it.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of depends. Well, obviously, keeping secrets about products and stuff, there's nothing wrong with that. They should be allowed to do that if that's how they want to do it. But lately, I think in response to leaking and stuff, they've been doing a pretty good job of trying to generate hype instead of just having these sort of surprise. Now that it's on shelves, you know what's in it.
Yeah, that's
they're having a lot more giving content creators lists of what's going to be in every set and letting them read it out publicly, stuff like that.
Funny you mentioned Wizards of the Coast for Magic.
Mm-hmm.
I do like how strict they are with stores. So, like, some Yu-Gi-Oh! Stores are very, some stores in my area, I'm not going to name names, obviously.
Yeah.
They don't do the best pricing. And sometimes you're not supposed to be charged for tournaments, like tax.
Oh, okay.
But they were doing that. And also they were also selling the, prize stuff they get on the down low. It's also,
like the OTS store stuff?
Yeah.
OTS packs?
Yeah, but Wizards of the Coast, they found out they were selling their Magic the Gathering stuff they give, like, for tournament price support.
And they
just took away... Yeah, they just took their rights away.
What?
And they're pretty strict about how they want to handle the game.
Yeah, so I like the rules. There's, like, rules of how the store should, handle it.
Yeah.
Because I don't like when it's the Wild West with how you can get your product. Because some places just have nothing. Some places have too much, and some places just overcharge.
Yeah, I know that can be an issue with, Digimon sometimes because of the way Bandai really just handles their games.
That's because they have different... Bandai doesn't distribute it. They have a third-party distributor, and they get to choose how much is distributed. So they could have, 1,000 of a certain product, for example, but choose to release, 300 to one store and give, 50 to all the other stores.
I don't really know how the system works for you yet at all.
Mainly through
I only know
Konami of
this
USA, which is located in Cali.
They've got a couple. USA, they've got a location in New York and one in California.
Yeah, so between those two and how product is released and shipped out and what factories is going to be printing all the US cards.
Mm-hmm. I'm only like this because I'm a huge nerd and I like reading this stuff.
I read Konami's report to their investors or whatever because I wanted to know. I was really curious, what percentage of their profit is Yu-Gi-Oh! Or specifically Master Duel or specifically Duel Links, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm reading through this document, right? I'm going through it. I'm trying to find the right section. And what was it? So there was one that was games, right? Oh yeah, they still make games. Apparently their games are still fairly popular in Japan. So I'm like, They got some numbers on. I'm like, that's cool.
They also had to do a lot of pachinko machines.
And then I get to something else that says like hardware, and apparently that's like discs. And back when they actually made consoles and stuff,
And
that's
the
like
pachinkos.
hardware. No, because then after that I read something that's like something vague about entertainment. I'm like, figured it out, pachinkos, because I know Konami makes a lot of pachinkos, and I'm reading through this very vague language about what this is, and I'm like, clearly this is the pachinkos. And then what is the next category after that? Well, one of the other categories was like digital entertainment, whatever. There was one that specifically said something about Yu-Gi-Oh!
Mm-hmm.
But then I read the one that's like something entertainment. I think the word adult was in there somewhere. So I was like, oh, this must be the pachinko machines. Read the vague language. It kind of sounds like it's pachinko machines. And then I look at the last section, and it's just pachinko machines.
No, they own like bars and like adult hotels
And hostess clubs.
Yeah,
I mean, if they're a Japanese company, so
they usually have their fingers in every pie.
Yeah, like it's best like for Japanese companies to diversify, considering how small the market is in that country.
Interesting.
And if they like need extra money, they just sell off one of those businesses.
Yeah, it's how they save themselves in bankruptcy. They don't have all their, they don't have all their eggs in just one basket.
Curious.
But I do like, because if you look at Bandai's biggest seller is not the card games or anything. It's Gundam model kits.
Oh yeah, like their Gundam factory is, it's not like a factory. It's like it's actually painted and like, made to look like a robotics workshop or something. Like they actually.
Oh, that's cute.
You know where you do they do the molding for like the kits. Yeah, that's how they do it. And neat thing they do, the sprue where after you cut everything off, in Japan you can donate it back, and they'll use that plastic to like make new kits.
That's cool.
Because the first kit they ever did was the RX-78, which is the original Gundam, out of completely recycled plastic. So I think it's neat when they're pretty open about what they're doing.
Japan in general is better about recycling and stuff like that.
Yeah, they're good on like the high-tech stuff. Not really social issues, though.
Be more efficient with how they use their stuff, yeah. But
the reason that works is because of their arguably less advanced social, that like you can get, they will like bully the heck out of you if they look like your neighbors. I have heard these horror stories. If you don't split all your stuff perfectly for trash day, for recycling, whatever, your neighbors will bring it back to your door and say, you did this wrong. And they'll do it really rudely. Yeah.
We don't have to really talk about like just card games, like video games, patch notes, or what they intend to do with the next new season or the next quarter.
Of what?
Of like any video game.
Of any video game. Like I'll use for example Gundam Evolution. They did all these patch changes and like changed the meta a lot.
Okay.
But they explained why they changed it. Like this weapon did way better.
They used to have that in Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yeah, and I think if Yu-Gi-Oh! Did that pretty much that'd be decent.
They did have it.
I know.
They had it, but the problem was they weren't willing to be genuine, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. I just appreciate when they're like, this is why we changed this, or...
They had it. They had one of their like lead designer dudes, or at least a spokesman of the company, something to that effect, would come in and he would write a post on Pojo, I'm pretty sure, that explains, this is why we hit these, this is philosophy of the ban list, this is why we hit these cards, a very well-written thing. The problem is, that was wind up in Zector format, and they hit a bunch of plant synchro cards that hadn't been relevant since the last format. Basically, everything they said clearly was unrelated to what actually happened and what was actually going on. They just weren't willing to say, we hit the old product to force more people to buy the new product because we need to make more money.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is what the ban list has pretty much become, just a tool to, sure, they'll address problem stuff, but not until after they've, made what they needed to make off of sets.
And that's, I don't know about, I'm sure there'll be some people are like, oh, how terrible of them, but it's like, I perfectly understand that. They're a company, they need to make money, that's the only reason this card game still exists, is because they make money. And there are ways of phrasing that people are happy to accept. If they say, if they have a list that's like, oh, we banned all of these cards, but we didn't hit a Shizu tier limit because we are protecting people's investment in the new product, right? If they said that, everyone would be like,
that makes sense.
Konami! Woo! Protecting my investment.
You're saying the quiet part out loud.
That reminds me of a really bad event that happened with Vanguard when they did a hit that was necessary, but it wasn't the hit they should have made. So about a couple years ago, we were in the middle of a tier 0 format just because they released a deck, and it was so much faster than all the other decks. It was the only one that people were taking to tournaments. But just to give a little bit of context, in Japan, there's not much of an independent card market. I mean, there are individual sellers who will resell stuff, but for the majority of what you're going to buy, if you're looking for singles, you're going to go to the shops because they'll typically just buy up people's bulk and such and resell them. And Japanese card shops are the best place to get bulk.
Yeah. And card shops in Japan it's a lot easier to gain products, so the prices there are much lower.
Also, they just have a very different policy over there. Like, they reprint. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is actually known, compared to like stuff like Magic, for having actually a fairly generous reprint policy, especially in later years. But it's nothing to compare to what they do in Japan.
Oh, yeah, no,
They keep the Japanese market happy.
They reprint everything into the ground over there. It's crazy.
Even in the same sets, they print a regular rarity one and then a higher rarity if you really want to bling out your deck.
They always let you crazy bling out your stuff. But even like, I can't remember when this was. I think it was after Hulk got released here in the US, people looked at Japanese copies of Hulk and Fabrax. And the like max rarity version, that was some crazy unique rarity, was like $20. It was insane. Yeah. It's like our default rarity was like $100.
Yeah.
It was bonkers.
Yeah. Anyways, to go what I was saying. So imagine that there's a one card that came out like maybe a year or two ago for a deck, and that currently in the tier 0 deck, it's doing really well. Now, in that sense, if you're a card shop owner and you know this card is pivotal to a tier 0 strategy, you're going to want to buy it up because you can start reselling it and make some profit for your store. So,
scalping.
I mean, obviously, but like it's just the market. You got to move the way it goes. Now, Bushiroad had to have an emergency list because his deck was way too oppressive. No one was playing any other decks except for maybe like one, but it represented like a fraction. Well, 90% was the tier 0 deck.
Yeah, 10% would be like pet decks people like.
Yeah, and if they managed to get there because they were good players. Anyways, Konami's emergency, Bandai's Bushiroad, sorry, their emergency ban list decided to hit the card that shops were buying up in bulk. And instead of doing it like a soft hit, like, oh, we're going to limit it or restrict it.
Yeah.
No, we're going to outright ban it. Doing so. Nemain.
Oh, Nemain, that makes sense.
Yes. Now, in doing so, a lot of these shops lost out on a lot of money because they bought so much of it.
Yeah.
Due to that, so many national chains in Japan, because shops can be also chains, decided to stop carrying Bushiroad product in general. And if you know anything about Bushiroad, they don't just make Vanguard. They make Buddy Fight at the time. Y Schwartz. They make so many other card games that
they also just make sleeves.
Yeah, they just make so much product there that it just cut off a lot of market potential.
Okay.
And it lost a lot of faith from people because of the fact that they did such a drastic hit when there was another card that was the problem.
Oh, you're talking about Lord. Yeah, and then they changed it to Choice Restrict.
Yeah, so I mean, that's the good thing about Bushiroad and Vanguard is that there's no to 1 to 2 or 0 for their cards. If there is a problem combo, like 2 cards certainly that interact in a way that's too oppressive, we'll just say that you can't use those 2 cards in the same deck, and that's it.
Yeah.
It prevents them from actually having to ban a good card. They just prevent a certain combo that is too oppressive.
Interaction.
Yeah.
I like that.
Which is what I wish, At the very least, I wish Yu-Gi-Oh would do something similar, like maybe in Duel Links.
They kind of did in Duel Links.
Yeah, like in Duel Links, like
They tried.
They try, but like I understand, like at this point, it'd be kind of too it would be too much to implement it.
Yeah, retroactively, that's just too much.
Too much, but
if they want to make a new card game that's not sevens, because that's a can of worms. Apparently, some people like it.
It's got some fun play to it, but it's just too simple for my liking.
I don't know. The fact that they aren't trying to give it to us is kind of disappointing.
I mean,
like obviously, we're not going to be playing it if it's not even being sold here.
I mean, the only thing we have is the video game, which actually got released here in the West, in the US.
Yeah.
And the anime, which is on Disney XD right now, dubbed.
It is?
Yeah.
I didn't know it was even out.
Yeah, you can watch it. Can't play it, but you can watch it.
That's funny. Yeah, it's funny that they were like, oh, wow, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is too complicated, too hard to get people into it. What if we just made a new one? I'm like, oh, okay. But
instead of just helping people learn the game a bit.
Yeah, which this is like technically this is like the third time this has been done to Yu-Gi-Oh! Specifically. Because if you remember Duel Links, that was basically what Duel Links' premise was. They rebooted the game with a couple minor changes. And then the TCG looked at that and said, that's a great idea. Let's do Speed Duel, where they rebooted the game. Same idea. And now Japan was like, you see, the problem with these reboots is that it's still Yu-Gi-Oh! And then they made Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s. Which, why is it called Yu-Gi-Oh? I know it's for branding, but it's like, it's just not Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a different card game.
It's because they still need to, it's because of the brand recognition.
Yeah.
But no, when they want to teach people to play, because there's this game coming out called Battle Spirits. It's a Bandai game.
Yeah.
But they post a lot of videos on how to play certain decks, how to play the base rules. There's even test games where they show you how the new meta might look.
Yeah,
I think Yu-Gi-Oh could benefit if they just put a little work into that. Because there are a bunch of Yu-Gi-Oh people on YouTube you can watch, but they all have biases.
Plus, a lot of them only really cater to the meta, to current trends and competitive, not really into learning the game.
Yeah, so
I feel like most of them have given it a shot. The problem is it's one of those things, it's not easy just to
teach people how to play Yu-Gi-Oh!
Verbally tell someone how to do it. The best thing that, a lot of us have taught people how to play Yu-Gi-Oh!, right? Have brought people into the game. What I always do, what always worked is, you just have them watch, right? Watch you and a friend play. Maybe you over-explain what you're doing a little bit to give them a better idea of what's going on. Of course, you teach them the basics, which you can find a billion YouTube videos on the basics, what the strict rules of the game are. But then you just play a match with somebody, have them watch, you over-explain what you're doing, and then by the end, you do that a couple times maybe, and then
you find them a deck
find them a deck that they think is interesting, and then you play with them. You kind of look over their shoulder to help them make the right plays. Maybe if you have 3 people, then they play with someone else. You help them make the right choices.
You explain to them why you do this or why you do that, and
then you just kind of go from there until eventually they don't need your help anymore. Where it's like, how do you translate that into a YouTube video? Because there's so many weird little small things that are either going to make sense to that person or they're not. And you aren't going to know what that is until they bump into it, right? So the best thing is just to have them try to play while you're there and they do something and you're like, no, that's not how that works. And then you explain why. And then you think that something's going to be really hard to explain to them, and then suddenly they just immediately get it. The game has so much to it.
I think the best way to get people to learn how to play the game is just practice.
Yeah. Yeah, just learning how to do interactions.
Unless they want to play a really, really hard deck. I think there's a Yu-Gi-Oh deck for anyone's play style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
the thing about Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that there's a lot of different decks.
Yeah.
You're not locked into one thing.
Although I will say that the most frustrating thing to me about is when teaching someone is when I've tried to teach quite a few people in the group to play Vanguard.
Yeah, I noticed.
But the one thing that I hate, at least from the more casual people, because I know people like Kin and Chris. I mean, Chris is casual, but at least he's willing to learn. Mm-hmm. Is that they actually do enjoy the mechanic. They enjoyed learning it. Maybe they don't want to play for sure, but they didn't mind learning it. But people like Julio and such, Nothing against them. They enjoy the game they like, and that's fine. They want to enjoy it, but they call the game too complex when Vanguard, to its very core, is relatively simple because you don't have to interact with your opponent as much, and you don't have to. Effects are more simple to play out because unlike in Yu-Gi-Oh, where if you don't meet the condition, or you don't meet, or you're not able to do the complete effect, you don't do it at all. Mm-hmm. In Vanguard, if you do a skill and you're able to pay the cost, you do as much as is possible, even if you can't do all of it.
Well, that's in Yu-Gi-Oh.
It's just resource management. Most games have that.
Yeah, it's just resource management, and they call it complex. Which I understand if it's a lot to learn at the first go, mm-hmm. and it takes some time.
Well, those same people definitely wouldn't get into Yu-Gi-Oh off rip.
Oh yeah, if they had to learn Yu-Gi-Oh from scratch and learn about chain links and interactions,
yeah, they would also not like it.
Yeah, so it's I understand not having the patience to learn a new game, mm-hmm. but to understand the differences between other card games is a big bonus because of how card games in general, the different ones, teach you very different ways of playing.
Yeah.
In Yu-Gi-Oh, the thing that'll teach you the best is going to be interaction.
Yeah.
How to play around your opponent, how to, interact with them, not just in the game, but also, outside of the game.
Yeah. Yu-Gi-Oh is fairly susceptible to angle shooting.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things with Yu-Gi-Oh. And then there's other card games, in Digimon, it teaches you about timing, and not timing when activating effects per se, but more when it's the time to make the right move. Because if you shotgun all your stuff in Digimon, you're going to lose really quickly because your opponent is just going to turn it around in one go.
Mm-hmm. Because of the memory system?
Because of the memory system, yeah, and just how some effects can just turn it around. Mm-hmm. But then there's other games like Magic. Magic is the best game for resource management. It teaches you just how to conserve your mana and when you need to use it, because there's times when you need to use it on your opponent's turn if you have those cards. You don't want a shotgun because you want to save it for other plays.
Yeah.
And then there's
definitely
Vanguard.
Thinking ahead there for Magic the Gathering, for sure.
Oh, yeah, a lot of thinking ahead. And then Vanguard, contrary to what people believe, if you learn how to play Vanguard, you learn one thing, and that's card counting. And not in the sense in poker where, I know what the deck is, so I know my odds. Mm-hmm. Well, kind of. Really, it's your likelihood of seeing things. Because Vanguard is a game of chance. Its chance factor is the biggest part of the game. Mm-hmm. Because, cards show up randomly in the game that can affect the outcome. And by playing the game, you learn how to play past those events. Because of that, you also learn, if I attack with this, he has a certain amount of cards in hand. That means he has certain ways to prevent me. This is either going to go through or weaken his state next turn. Mm-hmm. So you learn how to limit your opponent's resources, how to determine if your opponent's going to be able to see what they want to see. And that just makes your plays more tactical, and you're not just blindly attacking them. Mm-hmm. You're preparing for outcomes that could happen, and you're learning how to, play past them should they happen.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of things to learn from the different card games. They all have different approaches to the sort of game theory.